So, Brenda, that's go for me. Okay, thank you very much. So, dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the time is around the world. Certainly, very impressed by those of you staying up very late and waking up very early to follow these discussions. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Sam and myself to this second meeting of the Issues of Concern virtual working group. We, the co-facilitators, believe we had a very good meeting in November. It was a very fruitful discussion on the issues of concern, the future issues of concern. We got a lot of feedback for us to consider in the draft outcome document, which you will see on the 8th of January. But now, for this meeting, we turn our focus on the current EPIs and other issues of concern. The potential for some misunderstandings between the future issues of concern and the current EPIs and other issues of concern. We'll just have to live with that and try to be very, very clear. We are very much looking forward to today's discussion, which will be based then on the document that was sent out to you on the 30th of November. With us today, we also have the co-chairs for the intersessional process, and I will give the floor to them quite soon. If we could get the agenda on the screen first. Next slide, please. There you have the agenda for today's session with a review of the meeting agenda and meeting objectives. I'll then give the floor to the co-chairs as mentioned, and then we move on to an overview or presentation of our proposal in the document. Sam will do that. And then we will go through the document in section 4 of that document and open the floor for discussions, and then close with next steps. And then sooner or later, we'll be able to take a much needed and well-deserved holiday, I hope. So next slide, please. So what we've presented to you is a proposed way forward with the options to address the current or the existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern. It was released, as I said, on the 30th of November, so you've had 2 weeks to consider it. It was 2020, not 2022. Sorry for the for the mistakes there. We're all working under a certain pressure, I suppose. Now, this has been prepared by Sam and myself with his assistance of the Secretariat. So thank you again very much to the Secretariat for your support to us. It's very much appreciated. Now, what we have proposed for you is, the proposal that we presented to you is based on the feedback that we received. On the electronic feedback. And so we have read all your submissions, 12 in total, and tried to sort of find a way forward on the basis of those submissions. So thank you again for sending in those. They are very useful for us in our work. So if you then turn to the document that we have sent out, it is then section 4 of that mandate. And thank you for turning to the next slide. I'll go to that. But again, the focus of our work today will be on section 4 in that document. And then just a quick reminder again of our mandate. The last meeting, we went through point 1 or item 1 and 2 in the agenda, or the mandate, sorry, that you see on your screen. And today we focus on the third item, which is then develop proposals on how to deal with existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern. So next slide, please. This is again then an overview of the submissions that we have received. No change there from last time. I would like to state though that lines are open if you would like to send in submissions. If you did not have the time to do that, you're welcome to do that. And of course, there is an additional deadline for submissions on what we're discussing today on the, I think we said the 21st of December. Next slide, please. So then a final reminder there on which we went through the slide in our last meeting as well, on the categorization of the current EPIs and other issues of concern. I believe you know them well, but it's always useful to get an overview before we start the discussions. So there you have an outline of today's items, today's agenda. And before I give the floor to Sam for an overview of our draft document, our proposal, I'd like to give the floor to the co-chairs of the intersessional process. I don't know, would you like to start, David or Judith? David seems to be leaning forward, so.
I was actually just going to see if Judith wanted to start. Good morning, Thomas, or good afternoon, or good evening, Thomas. How are you? Sam, very good to see you, Sam. I hope all is well.
Judith might be muted.
Sorry, David, you go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith, and I hope all is well with you, Judith, today. First thing that I would like to do is to offer my sincere thanks to Sam, Thomas as co-facilitators to this session. It is most appreciated. I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to the SICEM Secretariat for their continued support. I think above all, though, I would really like to thank the SICEM community for your active engagement in this round, your participation in the virtual sessions, as well as the written submissions that have been submitted. Your continued engagement, your participation, and your enthusiasm, I think, are very, very much appreciated, not just by myself and Judith, but by the broader SICEM community. We're all very conscious of the particular times we are living in, also the challenges with participating virtually. I think it's important to note that we wanted to ensure that we're able to advance discussions, what is exactly being done here, and that we want to maintain momentum that we had under previous SICEM intersessional process meetings and the dialogues to make sure that when we do reconvene, that we're able to reconvene and these ideas are fresh in our mind. We want to be able to maintain that momentum, and so that is exactly what you're doing here. I mean, in my mind, the analogy that I've always made when explaining this is that it's almost like picking a book up that we have not read in about 12 months, probably 18 months by the time we get to meet again in person, and it will be trying to remember where we are in that book. So by having these sessions, by meeting virtually, by submitting written comments, that will allow us ultimately to understand the views of different participants, maintain the momentum, and keep the ideas fresh in our minds. I think the important thing here I'd like to highlight that few points is that the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres mentioned the new framework on sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020 was identified as one of the key conferences to protect people and the planet and lead the world that we are in into a sustainable future. So definitely the importance of the work that we're doing is highlighted at certainly the various highest of levels in this in the world that we are working in. I wanted to just wrap it up. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, recognizing that people have a very tight schedule these days. I wanted to thank you for your continued participation. We encourage your input, submit written submissions, participate in the virtual sessions. Thank you very much to you all, and I wish you all the best over the holiday season and a happy new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. if that concludes the message from the co-chairs, I'd like to give Sam the floor for a presentation of our proposal.
Thanks so much, Thomas. Good afternoon from Accra to all of you around the world. And thanks so much, David, for the kind words as well. And our sincere thanks to the Secretariat for assisting us to get thus far. So as presenting my co-chair, Thomas, I would like to share with you or remind you of what we discussed at the last meeting. So, what we have on the slide, yes, now is the structure of our proposal as co-facilitators. So we have the introduction, followed by the current context, followed by the overview of considerations brought forward by stakeholders in the submissions, and then the co-facilitated proposal on the way forward for consideration by the virtual working group. We have two annexes. One is the overview of the current emerging policy issues and other issues of concern, and Annex 2 is a summary of input received. Next slide, please. So we have two parts of our presentation or proposal. The first one, part A, is on the key general considerations in moving forward, and the part B is the proposed approach. First of all, we want to look at what may happen at the ICCM 5, and then we'll look at the options for the process to determine the next steps. We have two options for you, option 1 and option 2. Option 1 basically is about the proposals to be submitted on each emerging policy issue or other issues of concern 6 months before the following session of the ICCM, that's ICCM 6, for consideration at that meeting. And then the such proposal will include work plans, proposals for issue-specific goals and indicators in the new instrument, and or review according to the modalities established for the new Beyond 2020 instrument. Should we have no proposal at that point, then the next international conference at ICCM 6 may decide to discontinue the emerging policy issue or other issues of concern. That is the first option that we are proposing. The second option is about establishing a time-bound group for each issue and agree on and submit work plans at least 6 months prior to the following session of the ICCM, that's ICCM 6. And then the main functions will be 1, developing and coordinating the implementation of a work plan, which may include proposing indicators for review, targets under different strategic objectives of the Beyond 2020 instrument. And 2, coordinating with other subsidiary bodies, that's IOMC organizations and beyond. Example, the Convention Secretariat. And the third aspect is monitoring and evaluating the progress against the indicators. And lastly, making recommendations to the ICCM. Next slide, please. So what it means is that, as I said, we're going to have a discussion on the proposal, and we're going to review the following. A, the key considerations in moving forward, and B, our proposed approach. That is at the ICCM 5, and also options for the process to determine the next steps. Next slide, please. Yes, so I think at this stage, I would like to give the floor back to Thomas to lead us the discussion on the A aspect when I come back with the B. Thomas, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sam. So we thought it would be useful to have, first of all, a more general discussion on sort of the general considerations in moving forward. So we have these general considerations first, as Sam outlined, and then 2 different options presented. So we would try to divide the discussion in two. The first part then on the general considerations on how to move forward, and then more detailed later on sort of the specificities on how we do that, as we find it in option 1 and option 2. So at this stage, you see in front of you on the screen the general considerations as outlined also in the document that we sent out. And just also to make very clear that we have seen it as our mandate to outline a process, not any specific view on what to do with each EPI and other issues that we're concerned. This is about a process and on deciding what to do with the EPIs. We have also had, just to make that very clear, we also had as sort of our general approach that the EPIs that we move forward into the new framework, all, no, none, or some of them, they will be, there will be no difference made between the existing EPIs that we move forward and the new issues of concern that we may choose to adopt. So those are two elements that were perhaps not entirely obvious to all when reading our document, but by stating that now, I hope that is clearer and may be helpful to know. So with that, I'd like to open the floor for comments, views on sort of our general considerations. The floor is open, and I trust that the Secretariat will manage the speakers list.
Okay, so just a reminder to everyone to use the hand function if you can, and it's on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you're having difficulty using the hand function, just drop a note to everyone in the chat indicating your name and organization to ask for the floor. Great. Thank you, Claire from the UK, for breaking the ice. So Claire Dixon from the UK, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thanks again to Thomas and Sam for their work on this and the co-chairs and the paper. Just wanted to say a general point, I think, that fits under this section in particular, is that we really want to be clear that when we're taking on or thinking about issues of concern, we want to be very clear about the added value that this community specifically, as the Beyond 2020 framework, can add to any issue. And I think it sits with quite a lot of the points as well about the path forward with ownership. And I think that would be a really good thing to add under these key considerations here. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I then have Matthias Wolf from the UK, followed by Auden from Norway. Matthias, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much for giving you the floor. Good afternoon to everybody, and also thanks to Sam and Thomas. Work done and the proposals made. We just want to say that we agree with the general considerations, and thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Then we have Auden, followed by Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP. Auden, Norway. Auden, we don't hear you. Okay, well, how about we skip to Jacqueline Alvarez while we fix up with Auden for a moment. Jacqueline Alvarez, you're next, followed by Lara Nazef from the US. Jacqueline?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to the Secretariat and the co-facilitators for putting the the document out and letting us in a way think beyond. For us, one consideration that it's really important is the fact that EPIs and other issues of concern, as they stand already with the SAICM community, they have already been identified, and we prefer that they could be in a way seen as part of the new instrument as such, and not having a separate process when dealing with them. So if we have an issues of concern process within the new framework, the existing EPIs as well as the other issues of concern, in our understanding, could really fit into that process, with the caveat that they have been already identified, and also in the understanding that some might need to be phased out, just a question mark, but the process that it's been established in general for issues of concern should not be divorced of the EPIs. And we have that in a way thinking to avoid what has happened former or before with the GPA and the issues of concern. Having separate processes is not really the best approach. So that's for us is a key consideration in moving forward. So it is not only the international conference making decisions separate of how to deal with emerging policy issues, but them being part of the instrument, and then the decision on phasing out, implementation plan, working groups can really be thought in the same manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'll then go to Laura from the US and then go back to Auden from Norway, try again. So Laura, over to you.
Thank you. Here's developing the proposal. We have found the existing EPIs and other issues of concern useful to exchange best practices and raise awareness and make progress. We also think it's important to preserve the focus on establishing and strengthening comprehensive chemicals management frameworks at the national level. So we conference to assess the continued need for EPIs, and also to ensure that the Beyond 2020 instrument has the capacity that's both new areas of interest and also any existing EPIs for which the Internet Conference. We generally think facilitated approach for addressing these existing issues, and we look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I see in the chat, it says Auden is here. He says it's okay on his side. Do you want to try to still take the floor, Auden? I see you're unmuted. Given that you've said it's okay from your side, I don't hear you. I'll just move to Michelle Sheeran from Switzerland.
Yes, thank you very much, Brenda. And first of all, I would also like to thank the co-chairs and everyone from the Secretariat for having prepared this paper and having proposed these options, having gathered the different comments. This is really very useful and very appreciated from our side. I take the floor to very much support the intervention of Jacqueline from UNEP. We believe that it doesn't make a lot of sense to actually have several processes in terms of the different issues. We think there should be one process in terms of establishing implementation plans, having working groups or task forces, and so on. All of these elements to be considered and further specified for all of the issues in the post-2020 framework, and not introducing a sort of artificial differentiation between existing and other issues. We don't think that would be a very efficient way of dealing with the issues, and it will be important to move forward as efficiently as possible, especially with regard to also the existing issues, and have them well embedded and incorporated in the in the future framework, as we have seen from the evaluation that, and from different reports actually, that we have made some progress, but definitely not enough progress on existing issues. So we strongly also advocate to take this into account when we further discuss on how to move this all forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. And I have Lillian Cora, followed by Anastasia Swearingen. Lillian, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Congratulations for the documents, for putting all our thoughts driving the process. Of course, I support what Jacqueline says, but I also want to drive your attention to that we are not mentioning the limited access to funds and limited capacity of the lead organizations. Even so, there was a major strength. The APIs were a major strength in raising the profile of the international profile of these issues that we presented and we have working during the last process. But I think that we should pay attention to the limited funds and the limited support that in many cases the lead organization had to carry on and develop and implement actions in the different issues. It's not for every issue, but in many this had been the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Then we have Anastasia from the ICCA, followed by Alison Kennedy from Canada. Anastasia?
Hi, good morning, and thank you to the co-facilitators for putting all this work into this virtual working group. ICCA generally agrees with the general considerations put forward. We also agree with some of the comments that have been made so far. The previous comment on funding, we agree that that is an important component and one of the reasons why we're here and talking about some of the prioritization actions in putting together path forward on issues of concern and future issues of concern. So we thank you for putting these proposals in front of us and look forward to further discussions.
Thanks, Anastasia. The next I have Alison Kennedy from Canada, followed by Gilbert from IPEN. Alison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Secretariat. First, wanted to thank the co-chairs for the proposal and the time to consider it. We've had some good discussions on our side. In terms of 2 points that we wanted to raise, it would be helpful to have additional clarity or discussion on how this process that's outlined will relate to the criteria for issues of concern overall, and that sort of priority setting to identify those issues that are best suited for the Beyond 2020 instrument to be able to stimulate progress on. And then second, that an important part of elaborating a plan for any of the issues of concern is going to be looking at the availability of resources in order to achieve that progress. So those are two important factors as we consider the options further.
Thank you, Alison. Then we have Gilbert from IPEN, followed by Carolyn Vickers of the WHO. Gilbert? I seem to have lost Gilbert, so maybe we go next to Carolyn Vickers from WHO, followed by a hand from the government of Japan. Carolyn, go ahead.
Thanks, Brenda, and hello, everyone. The World Health Organization would like to ask people to think a little bit carefully about how these proposals would impact on the emerging policy issues work that's underway. I think we have a note of caution because proposals to establish work groups and to prepare new work plans has the potential to stall and throw into disarray the good work that's currently being done for some of these EPIs, and also to disempower the work, the alliances, etc., that have been set up. And I'm thinking in my mind when I'm talking about the Lead Paint Alliance. So, for example, the business plan of that alliance was noted by a previous ICCM and the targets were set to 2020. I think that it's very likely that the Alliance working on that project is probably not going to want to wait a couple of years to set a new target or a new work plan. The group's very motivated, and I think that it will be helpful to think, as we're going forward with the proposals, to think about how they're going to actually work in practice for some of the existing EPIs. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, I have the government of Japan. Maybe you could identify your name from the hand as well. I'm not sure. Go ahead, government of Japan.
Thank you. This is Suki speaking. And thank you very much, co-facilitators, and thank you very much, Secretariat. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And Japan thinks that the existing API should not be automatically succeeded, but instead the existing API should be equally dealt with other issues, and all the APIs should go through the new selection process under the Beyond 2020 instruments. And we are very looking forward to discuss the new criteria for the APIs. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Next, we have Gabby Engenman from UNIDO. Go ahead, Gabby.
Thank you. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the co-chairs for preparing this proposal and sharing it us in a timely manner. It was like from UNIDO, we would support previous speaker from UNEP, also Lillian and WHO, but also from Switzerland, saying that the existing emerging policy and other issues of concern in the same manner as new ones, or even to avoid that we don't have parallel systems. Also, the point of efficiency and moving forward is very much linked to it, as explained by WHO. So I think if we would have a approach that would put in question somehow if the existing emerging policy issues are still emerging in its source, so that would also make it possible to continue. Has shown the issues of concern are still relevant and are still we still need to continue working on it. We have done a lot of work. And finally, I think we also support fully that the monitoring of progress has to be improved and has to be become an integrated part of the overall new instrument. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabby. I'm just going to read out a comment here from Auden from Norway. Seems his microphone's not working. Just saying that he thinks it is important to identify and agree on the process for how to decide on the future of the current EPIs and other issues of concern at this point for decision at the ICCM. We believe that there should be no distinction between the existing EPIs and other issues of concern and the future issues of concern. Thank you, Auden. I don't see any other hands at the moment. So maybe I should pass the floor over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your contributions and views on these general considerations, which as well will inform the outcome document that Sam and I will put together. So with that, I think we're ready, Sam, to move on to the next item, to B, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Thomas, and thanks to all the contributors to the discussion so far. I think it's getting lively, and that's how we want to move forward with this. So I've already mentioned the proposed approach during my presentation, and therefore we would like to take the first aspect where we are talking about what happens at ICCM 5, that we should agree on an omnibus solution on emerging policy issues and other issues of concern that recognizes progress on emerging policy issues and other issues of concern and a second to date, highlight any immediate and specific priority actions as appropriate to ensure that efforts and momentum continue where appropriate, and also set out a process to determine next steps on the existing emerging policy issues and issues of concern under the Beyond 2020 instrument, and then request the next session of the ICCM 6 to deliberate on and determine the path forward on the emerging policy issues and the issue of concern beyond 2020 instrument. So I would like to open the floor here for your comments on our proposed approach, and I plead the indulgence of the Secretariat to monitor the interventions for us. So Secretariat, please help us.
Thank you, Sam. While I wait to see a hand, I see a comment here in the chat box, and maybe I'll just read it because we're waiting anyway, and I have a feeling Yaya's having a problem with his microphones. We have Yaya Masangi from Welfare Togo. Though I agree on not differentiating between old and new EPIs, I think due consideration should be given to the fact that agreeing on what qualifies to be an EPI is a difficult process. This can also delay progress. So we hear a strong point about the need to continue with progress. So meanwhile, on part B, I wait for some hands or names in the chat box. Great. The next prize goes to Laura Naza for breaking the ice on part B. Thank you, Laura. And Laura from the US, I give you the floor.
Just going back to just part A quickly on the general. We don't to continue many of the existing EPIs. If we want to take on additional issues, think carefully about how they fit in with the new issues that we might take on. And then also on B, we generally agree with the proposed approach. The total number of issues, like I just mentioned. And then we suggest that after the international conference makes the determination about the existing issues, the issues that continue should follow new issues of interest, tracking progress, and then future determinations of the need.
Thank you, Laura. The next person I see on the list is Astrup. I'm unfamiliar with who you are, so please introduce yourself and your organization as you open up. Astrup?
Yes, thank you. This is Marta Astrup from Norway. And sorry. Thank you and hello, everyone. I just wanted to say that Norway would prefer option 1 as outlined by the co-chairs. And one of the strengths of the outlined process is the submission of proposal for a work plan. And this work plan have future actions on specific issues and is thereby a review of the progress, status, and opportunities. And for us, it's central that the path forward must stimulate ownership and for implementation and action in moving forward on each issue. And we see commitment and progress as a prerequisite for continuing the different issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. Then we have Lillian Cora. Go ahead, Lillian.
Okay, one is on this word should at the beginning. I don't know, maybe we should use might or something due to the nature of the process we are working on now. The other thing is, I think that maybe we have to include in some way the indicators, and the indicators are not only of advance, of course, not only in the area of SciComm. By example, this issue that I mentioned before, the rising the profile at the international level and voluntary actions, when some issue had been presented as new and emerging issue, or in the SciComm, maybe the action didn't come from the organization or the leading organization or from UNEP, but the profile that was raised mobilized funds, mobilized resources, mobilized voluntary action. So this should be an indicator that have to be considered to keep the things going, or the issue alive and active under this process. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lillian. Okay, let's see, I don't see any other hands up for the moment. I see a couple of comments. I don't know, Sam and Thomas, we had talked about only taking on section B1 here first and then moving to section 2 with the options. Seems people are taking up a bit of both, so that might be up to you how you wish to take that on. I'm just going to read a comment here in the chat box and then turn back to you. It's from Gilbert from IPEN. IPEN favors option 2 for the process to determine next steps on emerging policy issues and other issues of concern, and provided comments on option 1 if it should be there and the options retained later.
Okay, so Brenda.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the first part is only, the issues that will go into the omnibus observation. So the main thing is about the options 1 and 2. So I think we can look at the options as a main issue and then let people make their comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe Alex, could we move to the next slide with the options on it so people can see them? And thank you, Sam. And in the meantime, I'll wait for new hands to be raised. I think Laura and Lillian are both old hands, so to speak. Great, I see Allison Kennedy from Canada. Allison, you have the floor.
Thanks, Brenda. When we were reviewing this, we thought it was quite interesting to see option 1 and option 2 as they're described. And this is not to throw a wrench in things, but we could also see these being a bit of a stepwise approach, where you go through option 1 and then following that, some of the steps of option 2, because there are useful elements and useful activities in each of these options. So while we may have an initial preference for option 1, and we're listening closely to the discussion today to see how that may shape up further, we did also see there's a possibility that there are elements of both options that could be part of a more fulsome approach. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Allison. I encourage people to get their hands up. I see Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yes, thank you very much. We would like to reflect in the previous speaker in saying that we also see beauty in option 1 and option 2 as a mixed. But having said that, we also, and following the rationale of our previous intervention, we think that for this to really be part of the instrument, we need to get closer to targets and indicators that we are working on virtual working group 1, but we need to have that mirroring somehow. With new indicators and specific goals might also be having very difficult ways to measure the progress. While we agree that each of the different existing EPIs and other issues of concern will need to have their specificities, we also think that we should be trying as much as possible to make those goals and indicators fit into what we have in the or what we are discussing in the indicators framework. And this brings me also to how to track afterwards. If you look at what's happening at the governance group, and they are looking at how to measure progress, still option 1 and option 2 are not talking about how these things will be measured as part of the instrument and not in a parallel thing. So all of this is to really, in a way, both options. We might need to think of a hybrid of the two options with some additions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Next, I see Michelle Sheeran from Switzerland, followed by Carolyn, WHO. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Brenda, for giving me the floor. We are grateful for having these options and the approach on paper to also further do some thinking about it. So far, we have a clear preference for option 2 and would support this option. It does make sense for us to proceed like this to ensure that we can have an ambitious approach for the issues in the post-2020 framework, which will be very important. We would also like to note that with this approach, it would be interesting to also discuss the option of having governments or other stakeholders express their interest in advancing some of the issues through this new structure as champions in order to harness those that have resources available and therefore through that ensure momentum. Also, I would like to mention the point that we too think it will be very important to make the links to other parts of the post-2020 framework. So in particular, it will be important to embed this option and make the links also to the means of implementation that we are also still speaking about, and also the targets and indicators and milestones that we're also still discussing. So to establish those links and ensure a certain coherence between the means of implementation, the resources allocation, and the targets, and these work plans for the different issues, so that all in all there is a coherence and we can ensure it makes sense moving forward. And so also in this view, I think there's quite some work that we can as a group do to prepare this before ICCM5, because these different discussions are currently ongoing, and so it's an opportunity to consider these links now, and as opposed to deciding at ICCM5 to launch processes to specify things. I think since this discussion is ongoing now, that is a very good timing to make these considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I pass to Carolyn Vickers, I'm just going to read out from Yaya Masangi from Welfare Togo on the chat. He's noted that they agree with the proposal from the co-facilitators on what should happen at ICCM5. So that's on part B. And then on the options, we prefer option 2 simply because it proposes the establishment of a time-bound group. And we need a specific group to advance this work. Our only addition is to include multi-stakeholder time-bound group, just to reflect the nature of SciChem. So thank you. That's very concrete feedback. Carolyn, floor is yours, WHO.
Thanks very much, Brenda. We'd like to see option 1 not preclude the possibility that in the targets and indicators discussion, an indicator could be set for some of the existing EPIs. And in the end, that may prove to be a satisfactory outcome for some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next is Gabby Engelman from UNIDO. Go ahead, Gabby.
Thank you, Brenda. We also see some merits to think about the hybrid option, to include as well the link to make more higher instrument that we are going to, as already said by previous speakers, to make sure that we really have a clear indication how we measure process, that we don't have a system with these emerging policy instruments and the process we measure progress, and also with the link with the resources available. So we think that maybe it would be worth to take option one and include with all these reflections.
Great, thank you, Gabby. Before I pass to Laura from the US, I just want to hear, I hear Lillian's comment in the chat about avoiding the word should under the nature of this virtual process and use might. Just take note of that. And then Laura Nazar from the US, followed by Olga. Laura, go ahead.
Thanks, Brenda. We have a process for option. I think it's important that support for addressing the existing issues occur via the existing working groups. And if there's sufficient interest and support for addressing the issue, there should already be a group implementing relevant activities. We do think that the point raised by Carolyn from VWG is an important one, and perhaps the process should clarify that work would continue on existing APIs until a determination is made. Also, step of option one include first determine the next meeting about whether the work should continue, and also decisions should there is a clear opportunity to make significant progress of the international conference. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Laura. Then I have Olga, followed by Zanyun Wang. Go ahead, Olga.
Thank you very much, Brenda. A group of NGOs supports IPAN and favors option 2, including the elevation of the IOCs to either 4 if needed. However, option 1 also contains important elements such as a review of the emerging policy issue or issue of concern according to the modalities established with the new Beyond 2020 instrument. So we suggest to combine both options to ensure that issues of concerns are evaluated and elevated to the next level of obligations as needed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Olga. Next is Zanyun Wang. Zanyun, maybe you should introduce your organization as well, just so people understand the acronym. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me, Brenda? Great, thank you, yes. Brenda. So I'm Zanyun Huang. I'm the focal point for IPCP, the International Panel on Chemical Pollution. It is a network of academic scientists working on the chemical pollution in all UN regions. We would like to support, also echoes Switzerland's intervention. First, I would like to emphasize that, or also to remind everyone about the GCO2 and also the recent UNEP assessment report on issues of concern, which both have identified that we have not made enough progress on the issues of concerns, and it might not be appropriate to further delay the progress on these issues. And I would also like to reflect that I trust this group. We have a lot of wisdom here, a lot of expertise and knowledge here, so that while discussing the options, we can also, like as Switzerland has said, potentially develop some of the work programs or work plans together with the IOMC organizations, before the ICCM 5 in order to not lose more time and make progress on these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Danyun. Next is Bob Diedrich, OECD, followed by Claire from the UK. Bob, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I can only reinforce what Zhanyun just said. I mean, we must not decide on anything that will jeopardize current implementation activities. Like for example, waiting for a time-bound group to be set up before we can do anything would be quite detrimental to some of the ongoing implementation work. I would also like to observe that for some of the issues of concern, like the one on perfluorinated chemicals, there is currently already a multi-stakeholder group that has been set up that is working on implementation issues. Just to reinforce, whatever we do, we must not jeopardize ongoing implementation work. It must not be delayed. Therefore, some of the proposals in option 2 we would not be very much in favor of. And I also would like to reinforce again what UNEP said. I mean, making as well as others, making the issues of concern part of the framework and not differentiate with other targets and indicators will ensure that the issues of concern don't take a life of their own and don't take over the whole framework like they did in the current cycle. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bob. Next, we have Claire from the UK, followed by Astrup from Norway. Go ahead, Claire.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to say that whilst we agree with WHO and the others, we don't want this process to stall any issues where there is momentum. We similarly want to ensure that unnecessary time and resources is not being taken to make comprehensive work plans for issues where there just isn't this momentum and are not being taken forward. So we do agree with the US then that whatever option we are using that are listed here, we do think that there is an important first step needed to determine whether the work should continue in the context of the new process that we are proposing.
Great, thank you, Claire. Next we have Martha from Norway. Go ahead, Martha.
Thank you again. And just to continue a bit on what the UK said about that it's important to maintain the momentum. And we just want to stress that we have to keep progress on the EPIs and other issues of concern in the transition to the Beyond 2020 instrument. So we just wanted to add that maybe we could add to the co-chair's note a point to encourage stakeholders to continue the actions that could be added in the note. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Next is Lillian Koref, and followed by Jacqueline Alvarez. Go ahead, Lillian.
Thank you. I want to highlight the issue that we don't become, or this process don't become an exclusion process of the issues of concern. We don't have to be naive. We know that this is, in many cases, the only space we have for to present issues of concern. And sometimes there are important interests, sectorial interest, as was said before, also the small capacity of participation and moving the things, also inside the UN organizations, that sometimes when we go to them, they say, well, we don't have the capacity to work on this, on that. So we have to be very careful in not becoming a process of exclusion, okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lillian. Next, we have Jacqueline, followed by Mr. Gu from FAO. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Thank you very much, Brenda. So at this moment, I think it's important to reflect what we are trying to achieve here and what is the best manner. Following what Thomas was saying at the beginning, we are trying to figure out a process at this moment. So for doing that, what we see is that ICCM5 will need to take a resolution, and that resolution can, in a way, be responding to different things. One is, for example, and we keep on saying or following the same rationale, is the existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern going to be seen in the framework of issues of concern as a process, independently that they have already been identified or not? And that is what a resolution at ICCM5 might indicate. And then if anything needs to be phased out, then that doesn't need to happen at ICCM5. Will we have the opportunity to really assess if something can be phased out at ICCM5? If that's not the case, then the process needs to indicate what is needed to be addressed for those emerging policy issues or other issues of concern. So I guess if we are trying to answer the how questions, those are the type of things that we might need to be answering at this moment. What thing a resolution needs to include, and what things will be part of the new instrument as such, with maybe not the specific name of highly hazardous pesticides or endocrine disrupting chemicals, but in a way how to embrace it in a very generic manner. Because at the end of the day, the instrument will be with us for a very long time, so we hope. And having said that, then we need to see how we hook the EPIs, those that might need to be phased out, those that might need to continue. Over, thanks.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Now we have Mr. Gu from FAO, followed by Anastasia from ICCA.
Thank you, Brenda. Can you hear me? Oh, yes. Okay. To develop the work plan with the indicator is wonderful. I think it's crucial for achieve the goal of addressing EPIs. My comments is that now currently addressing EPIs is coordinated by international organizations on the IONC and the cycling framework. However, they must be conducted by all relevant stakeholders, especially member countries. So what kind of work plan should be? Yeah, this is I propose to consider. So the program will be for the international organization or the all member countries. Yeah, this is one question. Second is that regarding process, I support to keep the consistent with existing methodology. However, yeah, considering the ambitious goal of the addressing EPIs after ICCM5, I think we showed a new approach, new mechanism to address the EPI, especially to have the active engagement of all relevant stakeholders. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gu. Next, we have Anastasia from ICCA. Go ahead, Anastasia.
Hi, thanks, Brenda. So ICCA has a preference for option one. We support the comments that were made by the US, the UK, OECD, and others about the need to keep momentum on the existing issues of concern and recognizing that there are already groups set up working on these issues, and those should not be forgotten and should have a role in putting forward the work plans and proposals going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia. I thought I had other hands up, but they seem to have disappeared on my screen. So I don't know if anyone else would like. Oh, George, that's who it was. George Korlaganis from UNITAR. Go ahead, George. George, we're having a tough time hearing you. I don't know if you can work with your microphone.
Me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Great.
Okay,
Thanks, George.
okay. I would like to refer to table 1 in the co-chair's paper with these 3 categories. I think this is an interesting approach. We have then the EPI's issues with emerging scientific evidence, and there I think that there could be, you know, some interrelationships between the molecules of these 4 EPIs, and then we have the other category with information sharing across the life cycle, and then the third category focusing already on regulation. And I think that's an interesting approach. Maybe we could discuss this idea further when we define the process. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I don't see any other hands up for the moment.
Hello, Brenda.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. I don't see other hands.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think we've had a very lovely discussion so far, and the various expressions have been very important for the process of the progress of the work. And so we need to perhaps take a look of all the various inputs, and then maybe come up with our coaches and maybe an enhanced drafts. But before we get there, perhaps let me at this stage pass the microphone to Thomas to take us to the item item 4, the next step, so that we see where we are going. So Thomas, if you can hear me, please take it up.
I can. Thank you very much, Sam. And yes, I think we had a very good discussion so far. Although I do recognize from a rather limited number of stakeholders. So we should keep that in mind as well. I wonder if you I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but we've heard some make the case for example, a combination of option 1 and option 2 with potentially some additions. And we've also heard some make the case that the future issues of concern should not be a separate part, but it should be integrated in the new framework, with the experience having been made, I understand, under SciChem, that the EPIs very much took their own, I mean, they had a life on their own, and were sort of separated from the GPA. I think that it would benefit us all if if some of you would be willing to come forward with some further views on this. I think that would also very much inform Sam and my work on the outcome document. So if that triggers any one of you to come forward with a few additional points, that would be very much appreciated.
So we will move to the item 4 or so.
Sorry, no, I asked a question. Sorry if that wasn't clear enough. I mean, if anyone would be willing now to take the floor and further consider some of the well, the aspects or the questions that I raised, that would be interesting. If we give people sort of a few seconds to consider whether to intervene on those issues.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thomas, why don't you put your question maybe in the chat so everybody can see it? That might be a helpful way, if you don't mind.
Thanks. We'll try to do that.
I can put it in if you tell me.
Then I would have to rephrase it. I mean, it's a lot easier just to do it,
Go ahead.
orally. Anyway, okay. So several have made the case or brought forward the possibility of combining a hybrid version of the two options, but potentially with some additions. That was one item that I thought was interesting, and if they had any further views on that, would like to elaborate on that point, that would be very interesting. So basically, which kind of elements would you like to add? What are you missing here? The second one is the link made between the future issues of concern and the rest of the framework. We did hear that the EPIs took on a life of their own next to PsyChem, the rest of the PsyChem work, in particular perhaps the work on implementing the GPA. Do you have any ideas on how that could be addressed? How we could actually, bring about a change to that? And if the third point I've heard is also the need to, certainly to keep up, keep up the activity level, and that we must not sort of just put our work down until ICCM 6 and a decision can be made. And not jeopardize important implementation work done so far. And so I was wondering if, and that would be then my third question, would you like to elaborate further on that? How could we basically from now on until ICCM 5 make sure that we keep up and that we are ready to move on into the period between ICCM 5 and ICCM 6? And keep up the work. So would very much appreciate some views on that. Was that too much, Brenda, or were you able to somehow rephrase my thoughts into understandable English and something for people to reflect further on?
I guess that's up to. I guess it's up to others to judge whether I captured it or not. But I only put down comment 1 and comment 2. I kind of missed the part about the connection between the framework and the issues of concern. But maybe if these two questions are up, then we go to the second piece later. So the hybrid approach, I reflected a couple questions in the chat, and then also how to keep momentum going. So I think those were two of the concepts you wanted to advance.
Yeah.
So they're now in the chat if anyone wants to raise their hand and speak to it. And I see a volunteer already, so
that's great.
Yeah, so she gets another icebreaker prize. That's Alison Kennedy from Canada.
Thank you. You ferreted me out. I did mention at the beginning of this conversation that while we might have a preference for option 1, we did think that there could be a stepwise approach with these. So maybe I can just explain that a little more and what we were thinking. So on option 1, we're getting the proposals coming forward for each of the emerging policy issues or other issues, and that would include a recommended path forward on them, everything that's described there in B. The benefit of this is that it uses the existing emerging policy groups to do that work without having to create a new one, whereas in option 2, you're creating a new time-bounded group, which might take a little bit of time to create. So that's why option 1 is preferable. You can use those who are already working together to outline what that plan is, but then we actually have a decision point to take a look at and examine those, the recommendation on the path forward for those, and whether or not they'll continue forward, all of the whichever issues are going to go forward. And then you get to option 2. because what we may not be able to do is take on every issue. It may be too many, so we're going to have to look at the ones that where the Beyond 2020 instrument is best placed to make progress on those. So then you get to option 2. And you could have a time-bounded group, as it's described there, to agree on and submit a work plan, so what it would actually do. And then the options, or the activities described in option B, are quite useful. So I guess that's what we meant by there are useful activities in both of the options, but we see a stepwise, there could be a stepwise approach, so that first you do that, elaborating what is the progress, what can be done, and you have a decision point about what's going to continue, and then you get into the second part of it, and you can set your indicators, and you can make a time-bounded plan for making progress on these. So that's what we were thinking, and we're still interested in listening to different views and taking it all on board as we come up with our final comments later this week. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. I have a couple more hands here, Sam and Thomas, so I'll just go through them. We have Claire Dixon from the UK, followed by Jacqueline from UNEP. So go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, so thank you. I think essentially it's to support the Canada intervention, and it was kind of breaking it down to think about what the two options provide in terms of their benefits and strengths. And option 1, I think, it does provide the intention of commitment, which we've spoke about as being important, and also provides ownership, and then the consistency and the momentum with those currently working on those issues. But I think for us, the kind of strengths of options 2, which needs to also be considered, is that we have had quite a few speaking about the importance of indicators, which I think is a very technical element, and also the role of kind of science and evidence in reviewing how to take these forward. And so therefore, I think there are benefits within option 2. So I think essentially, yes, I can see the benefits of having a hybrid of both. And we'd be very interested if the co-chairs could, take a role in merging the two, and we could consider that as a potential third option, as having a hybrid of the both.
Thank you, Claire. Then we have Jacqueline Alvarez, followed by Matthias Wolf representing the EU. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Yes, thank you. And we, in a way, want to refer or to answer 2 of the questions that were put forward. One is in relation what it is missing. And I think what we are missing is that at ICCM 5, we need to take a decision on how we're going to deal with EPIs. And as we were saying, for us, a nice way forward without delaying is indicating that they need to be part of the whole instrument and are part of the issues of concern, with the caveat that they have already been identified. And if afterwards they are to phase out, that decision can happen at ICCM 6 or what the name of the next conference that I don't know which one it will be. But at the end of the day, it's not parking the issue. So that's one element missing. And the other one is that it's not captured maybe in the chat as Brenda was typing, which is the linkages with the framework as such. So one very maybe fast way of doing it is linking with the targets and indicators work and objective C, where we have at this moment discussions, and they are waiting, and they have parked somehow the discussions to see how this group evolves. So the objective C, as it stands right now, is process oriented. So there are one possibility is to really work on that objective and propose targets that are more action oriented and that can really create some kind of understanding on how to measure the EPIs, but not only the existing EPIs, but not only that, also the new ones that will be coming somehow. So then as the understanding on targets and indicators becomes clearer, I guess that it will be easier to see how those things hook to each other. So those are for us very pragmatic ways to move things forward without parking and delaying anything at this moment. And we also, in a way, think that the hybrid, the mixing the 2 options, is what we need to consider as it's bringing the beauty of both and just not parking the things. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Next, we have Matthias Wolf. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Yeah, we had similar thoughts like Canada and the UK and the European Union. Two questions in this regard. The first one is whether the leading IOMC organizations, as proposed in option 1, are already able and willing to lead such working groups. That's a question we have. And the second question came up by the interventions made today by WHO, OECD, and others, that they said the idea of carrying over all the existing issues of concern in EPIs to the new instrument and align them with the new modalities might jeopardize progress made and action on implementing work and so on. And our question in this regard is, what could this process do exactly to that doesn't become the case? You know, of course, we want that action continues and don't want to jeopardize anything. But in the end, of course, we think that all issues should be treated in the same manner at some day. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matthias. Since you're not my co-facilitator, I didn't write down your question, but I think there's some questions posed. And while I wait for the next speaker, I'm just going to read out Yaya Masangi from Welfare Togo has a problem with his microphone. So he just said their preference for option 2 does not mean that we ignore the ongoing work by different groups. Our understanding is that this time-bound group will be a coordinating body of all the groups working on existing EPIs and would also be in a better position to deal with emerging issues or issues of concern that currently there is no group responsible for them. The new group does not necessarily replace existing groups. So thank you for that clarity, Yaya. I see Michelle Sheeran's asking for the floor, so I pass the floor to Michelle.
Thank you, Brenda, for giving the floor. My intervention is very much along the lines of what you have just read out from as a comment from the chat. We are in favor of option 2, and at the same time, you of course want to make clear that establishing time-bound task forces would in no way should in no way prevent ongoing work from being carried out. Not at all. In our view, it's more that actually the current level of activity is absolutely to be carried forward, and work done so far is in no means to be lost. On the contrary, with establishing these groups, we think we could, through them, ensure that the current level of activity is actually sort of like something like a minimum level of activity, because we think it's very important work that is carried out, and that we need to continue and amplify in a certain time frame in order to ensure progress on the issues. And that we know from the GCO2 and the SAICM evaluation, but also the UNEP issues of concern report, that so far with this mode that we have had in the current SAICM, the progress was insufficient. And in our view, when we look at option 1, it's we don't see much difference to the mode that we have been operating under so far. So therefore, we think option 2 is needed to ensure that the good work carried out so far can be amplified and scaled up and measured against time, and that there can be recommendations if progress is not happening fast enough. So again, to say, we think the work that has been done so far is good, and we think it should continue, and we think IOMC should have an important role going forward, and their work should be used. And it's more the question of how can it be supported and opened up to also more commitment that would support what has been going on so far, and all this, you know, to be carried out in a structured way, so that similar to what the EU has said just now, this can happen for all the issues, the current ones, and also the ones to come. So we still think it would not at all put at risk what has been done so far. On the contrary, it's to make best use of it and ensure that this is being more is being done in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I give the floor to Olga, great. I see Matthias's question, so I'll just read them out from the EU and the member states. That are the working groups in option 1 more or less ready to take over the foreseen tasks, and are IOMC organizations able and willing to run the process in this way? And then another question toward the relevant IOMC organizations: what could be done to align the existing EPIs and issues of concern with the new modalities without jeopardizing the ongoing work? So I think that relates also to Thomas's question earlier. So over to you, Olga, and then I expect hopefully a couple of IOMC hands maybe to come up in response to some of these questions. Olga, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. So a group of NGOs agrees with UNEP that at ICCN 5 there should be a decision about how to deal with emerging policy issues and issues of concern without delay and the linkages with the framework. So we also believe it is important to combine option 1 and 2 and keep important elements from both options. For example, option 1 includes a review of the emerging policy issue or issue of concern according to the modalities established for the new Beyond 2020 instrument. And option 2 also includes a possibility to conduct monitoring and evaluation of the progress against the indicators and elevate the issues of concern to other fora. So we will provide our suggestion to the text by this Friday. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Olga. Let's see. Okay, I have Angela Rivera next. Thank you, a new voice again, followed by Carolyn Victor. So go ahead, Angela.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Not very well, Angela. Can you speak a little closer to your microphone?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Better.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I just want to highlight some general points on behalf of Colombia. Of course, this is not the final position of our country. We're still discussing internally, but just to highlight some key ideas that we have been discussing. So regarding the options that we have in front of us, we believe that option 2 is more structured. And we believe that it's important to keep in mind that indicators are really important in terms to moving forward our action in terms of the issues of concern and the different priorities that we will have in this new framework. We also believe that it's important to talk about monitoring and evaluating. So we fully support option 2, but we also share the view that perhaps could be a hybrid option. And we would like to kindly ask, and I think in the same line like UK, that could be useful to have this hybrid option just to see the main difference. And we are open to discuss an option that makes both options. But just to highlight, it's really important to have indicators and monitoring and evaluating of the implementation. Just regarding just an additional comment in terms of the procedure, and we would like to share the view expressed. I think it was UNEP or Jacqueline or someone else who highlight the importance to have a clear decision under the ICCM5. Our main concern is that if we just leave this discussion until the next meeting, which means new ICCM6 or whatever, we don't know when it's gonna take place, and we will have uncertainty in terms of the timeline. So we believe that the ICCM5 should give us some guidance in terms of how to proceed on this matter. So perhaps could be important to have a step approach, but keeping in mind that the ICCM5 is important in order to provide us some guidance and move forward on this. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Angela. Next is Carolyn Vickers from the WHO. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you. While I can't speak on behalf of all of the IOMC organizations, I'm taking the floor because I had expressed a concern about the tasks being taken out of the hands of the existing groups. What I can do, though, is to say that the IOMC organizations could discuss this issue if you'd be willing to let us take the questions away and come back in the next round, because I understand that there is a process whereby we can provide additional submissions by the 21st of December. So that's what we could do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. Don't see any hands up. I see a comment from Susan Wilburn. Healthcare Without Harm wants to align with the NGOs expressed by Olga and IPEN and Angela Rivera. That decision should be taken at ICCM5 and not wait. So thank you, Susan. I don't know, Sam, Thomas, how you wish to proceed, whether you wish to hear from others or it's in your hands.
Well, thank you, Brenda. If there aren't any more interventions or questions, perhaps we can go to the next session, but Thomas can also express his view.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Sorry, I mean, we have still 27 minutes and I still have a question. So, so if you just allow me to just, I think thank you all for stepping forward with some answers to some of my questions. I think that was very much, well, that's very much appreciated, and thank you also to Caroline and for proposing to come back with more answers on behalf of the IMC organizations, or for the IMC organizations to come forward with some views on the questions, I think, more articulately put forward by the EUM and member states. One question that I had was, I mean, I think it was perhaps Jacqueline who and others, but certainly Jacqueline stressed the interlinkages between the targets and the issues of concern. And just to note that we have been in contact with the co-facilitators of the Targets and Indicators group, and the understanding is that they will, receiving information from our work, they will look into Part C or Section C, Objective C, and work more on that. I fully share your view, Jacqueline, that they are process-oriented, the way they're written now. Perhaps they should be worded differently. But there is also the dilemma of having, too much into a pretty much set, negotiated, discussed, agreed set of objectives and targets, and then having issues of concern which may, evolve and change, and perhaps we need to revisit targets and indicators. And certainly now, with the risk of putting you on the spot, if you were willing to just elaborate slightly further on that, that would also, I think, be very interesting, and for Sam and myself, and I think also for the rest of the group to hear the views. Thank you.
The good news, Thomas, is I think Jacqueline's hand up was up before you put her on the spot. So I see Jacqueline. Do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you. And I saw this coming, so I said, okay, take the initiative. Yes, and we have been, in a way, thinking a lot on how to maybe do or have a set of indicators that are not 20,000 and that are not informing 10 million targets. So in a way, what we have been thinking, and we have been also discussing with our statistic units in UNEP, that they are very well, very knowledgeable on SDGs and methodologies. And the conclusion that we have come is that we need to have some kind of hooks within the framework. So, for example, at the level of targets, we have to indicate, we have to have somehow impact indicators to measure issues of concern. And then at the level of indicators, what we call composite indicators, meaning that it is not referring to only one subject, but it's a way of measuring progress at the country level. So then you can combine progress in different things and start getting some kind of methodology on how to collect the data, but also on how to inform things that make sense. So you don't have details, but you have a level of you make it composite. You just elevate those single indicators into something bigger somehow, and that's a nice way to do it, and that can also be long lasting somehow. The other thing that we have been thinking a lot is how in our understanding, the framework as such really needs to be long lasting somehow. But we can have, as for example the conventions has the amendments to the annexes, which is a simple process. So if we are reaching indicators and getting them, achieving them, then we also might need to think on how to really, move. We cannot have that at the level of the targets in our understanding so far, but there is a way to really put those things together so that the framework, we don't have to revise the framework, but we can assess the progress because of the set of indicators can inform towards the targets and the vision. I hope I didn't confuse you more with this thinking. But in a way, we see the potential of really, having the linkages of the existing EPIs, issues of concern, the targets and indicators in a manner that makes sense. So that was my intervention.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah,
I see another hand up here, so I'll pass the floor to Mariana Darvani. Maybe you could identify, Mariana, where you're from as well, please.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
I don't hear you well, Mariana.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. I don't know if you could speak a bit closer.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder. This is Mariana Darvani from the Ministry of Health of Brazil. So just to let you know that we'll need to make further consultations with our other colleagues from the other areas, and then we'll get back to you soon in written. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. Thomas, I don't see other hands up, Thomas and Sam. So,
yeah, thank you. I believe that with that, and thank you very much, Sam. We may move on to concluding the meeting and the next steps. As I've already said, there is a deadline for electronic input. It's on the 21st of December. And we would very much then welcome written input on our proposal. That is section 4 in our proposal, which we've then discussed today. We'd like you very much to use the template provided for input. That would greatly, that would improve or make our work a lot easier. If you prefer to submit a PDF in parallel, please send a Word file to the Secretariat. It's here on the screen. And if possible, we encourage you also to have discussions with colleagues in your region or sector to combine ideas and interests in joint submissions. That will, of course, also make it easier for us. And I think that we've been able to have a fruitful discussion here today, where you've also been inspiring each other, and I think that's very positive. So on the 8th of January, that's the big day for Sam and me at least. That's when we have our deadline for releasing a draft on the outcome document from this group on Annex B and the process for further issues or future issues, and then secondly on addressing the current emerging policy issues that we've discussed today. And then having received that draft from us on the 8th of January, 10 days later, the 18th of January, we'll have our third and last meeting of this group with final discussions on that outcome document. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for your participation in this meeting. I'd like to thank Sam again for our great cooperation. It's great working together with you, and again for the assistance from the Secretariat. Thank you all very much. And with that, I wish you all a very good holiday. If no one else wishes to take the floor, I wish you all to stay safe and come back well rested for the meeting on the 18th of January. Okay? Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks so much as well, and bye-bye.